Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today. I just have this really deep bond with Southern Utah, and particularly Cedar City. My wife grew up in Cedar City, and I actually left school and came down here on a wing and a prayer to convince my wife to marry her. And so I think my biggest claim to fame is I've kissed my wife on every single bench through the entire campus here. So I love SUU, and I hope you all know how much I believe in you and how much potential is actually possible for you. I think there's a lot of concerns and a lot of statements made regarding millennials, but I believe in the millennials. I believe in your generation. And I have to tell you, I think that more good is going to happen, and more world problems and more potential is occurring at this phase than ever before. And true, there's some complexities, and there's going to be a few bumps along the way, but I just want you to know that I believe in you. How many of you believe that you can create $1 million business? How difficult? Raise your hand if you really truthfully believe that right even now you can create $1 million business. Okay, good. I got a few hands. I wish that they were a little quicker and a little higher. Okay? The reality is it's not that difficult and hard to create $1 million business once you believe it, once you get after it. The question is can you do it morally? And can you do it without disrupting and blowing up your life? But the key precipice is the concept of actually believing. And then applying a couple of key principles, and as I think I'll show you here in a second, I didn't have a chance, guys. I grew up in Beaver. There was no stoplights in Beaver until a couple of years ago, okay? All 2,000 of us, if you counted the cows. That's where I grew up. And if you told me that I'd create, I don't know what number it was to now, 47, whatever it is, that many businesses and have the cool opportunities that I've had in my life, I would have told you to sprout wings and flap yourself to the moon. So a lot of times life will bring to us what we want if we're willing to work hard, and then I'm going to teach you my magic formula. Every time you see me, how many of you have seen me before and listened to me? A number of you, so you're going to get a repeat on the value equation because I think it's so vital every time. I believe in you guys. I love you guys. On the drive down, there was a young man that last year, matter of fact, it isn't even a full year now, I heard him pitch in the 90-second pitch competition. This was a humble, nerdy, great young man. He happened to be a freshman in college, okay? On the way down, he just called me up to inform me that my latest venture is worm poop. I invested in him. I believed in him. I've been mentoring him. This young man has sold enough worm poop to make him a millionaire at the age of 23. Okay? Is it possible? Yes. So I'm not an arrogant guy. Those of you that know me know the vibrato isn't much my thing. But you know what I'm going to teach you today, I believe in. I fundamentally so believe in it that if you apply some of these principles, it will have dramatic impact in your life. How many businesses if 10 businesses start, how many of those will succeed? 1. The number is 1 in 10, and I'll get those statistics worse for you. Out of business plans, if all you're doing is a business plan and running around shopping it for someone to get money, 1 out of 1,000 of those will ever get money. Of those, 1 in 10 will succeed. The reason that I'm such a profound believer in this concept of lean startup, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, is Zigzag Principle, which was one of the 3 or 4 key moving works that started the lean startup movement. And I so fundamentally believe in it, not because it's an easier way, not because it's cheap, because it dramatically increases my odds. And it's not just me now. If I start 3 companies, one will fail. And everyone mentions the successes. I have a higher fail ratio. Where's Tyler? Where'd you go, Tyler? You know, You didn't mention 18 failures, and it's on there. Everyone skips over the 18 failures. Guess who owns 18 failures? I'm really proud that I failed 18 times. So I've actually failed more than I've succeeded. And so the concept here with entrepreneurship, guys, and the reason that I love lean startup and zigzag, call it what you will, business model canvassing, pivoting, call it whatever you want. The reason that I love it is I can take quick successive swings until I hit one on. If I start 3 businesses, almost verbatim, one will fail, one will be mediocre, one will become a multi-million-dollar business. And so I think I've given you each a piece of paper, and if I could encourage you to each write these down. And if you're interested in entrepreneurship, this is a serious model that you should take a look at. I'd also encourage you and make a huge plug for the business pitch competition tonight. That's the primary engagement point for all of the ELC members. And so all the mentoring and the capacity that you have to actually engage and plug in with proven business executives, that's the plug-in point. So come tonight, we're going to have a blast. 22 rapid fire. How much are we giving away tonight, Holly?
$3,500.
$3,500 in 1 hour, and top one's $1,000. So better than the kick in the pants. So with that being said, I will mention that, how much do I love you guys? I love you guys so much, I vowed that I would never give this presentation ever again. I last gave this presentation, I actually had to go searching for the PowerPoint. I got really weary of all the presenting. And the last presentation I did, this was Harvard at a keynote at their business school, and I says, I'm not going to top that one. And so I put it away. Guess who just topped it? Raise your hands, because you just topped it. So you're more important than Harvard Business School. So, and I say that in all sincerity. I believe in you. I believe in you. You don't believe in yourselves as much as I believe in you. But you guys can do this. You have ability to, with great capacity, to take control of your own destiny. You got things that most don't. Coming from a rural community, coming in a college with an amazing president. I hope you appreciate your president and the way that he leads. You guys got opportunities that most don't. I'm glad it's a little harder and you're not up there just having everything handed to you. But your work ethic and potential is beyond anything you can imagine. Okay, with that being said, we're going to jump right into Zigzag, and I don't have a clicker, so we're just going to have to go to the next one. All right, don't click that yet. Who came here directly today? No, go back. You got to go back. Go right there. I got to have that video. That video better work. If not, we're dead. Who drove directly here today? Who came directly here? Who came directly to class? Come on. Who drove directly to class here?
What?
You guys really are not owning this. Did you come directly to class? Did you come directly to school today? Anyone did?
Oh, yeah.
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay.
Nor did I. If I had, I wouldn't have made it even a block. Life is not about straight lines. Life isn't straight lines. Life isn't straight lines. We don't operate in straight lines in our life. When we operate in straight lines, this is what happens. All right, go to the next slide. Oftentimes in life, we get diverted and we take paths that we didn't even intend. In 2005, I had one of the hardest things of my life happen to date. I had a hostile takeover occur of a company that I had founded and created. Brought a dear friend in, and we were getting ready to sell this business to the New York Times. It was the largest business blog network in the world. And the hostile takeover occurred. It so shut me down that I couldn't even get out of bed. And at that point, I shut down all my businesses, sold the ones I could, and the ones I couldn't, I just shut the door and vowed that I was going to take a 2-year sabbatical. I got about a month and a half into that sabbatical, and Chris's, raise your hand, his younger brother, who is my brother and best friend in this universe, had an intervention with me. And he basically went like this: Rich, you're driving us crazy. You're going to drive your wife and your family crazy. You've got to do something. So get off the sabbatical. Write a book. Just write a book and tell how you do this stupid little hat trick that you do of creating $1 million businesses and everyone will buy it. And so I says, okay, it sounds like a good idea. I started writing the business, and it ended up either being that or therapy. 2 years, 3 months, 9 days later, I published the book, and it got a lot more attention than ever intended. Me being a national best-selling author and all these things, it was all basically an accident, but I would argue it's a detour and a zig and a zag. So go to the next one. So out of that came a company, Castle Wave, that we called Eating Our Own Cooking. And at that point I says, I'm done, I'm never going public again. And then an interesting thing happened. In 2011, my family and I, as mentioned, we loved to climb in the Himalayas. And as we were taking our youngest sons over there, my youngest at that point was only 7 years old, and we're going up above altitude. And as President Wyatt knows, when you go above about 12,000 feet, bad things happen to your body. And so if you go higher than typically 1,000 feet a day, you get cerebral edema or pulmonary edema, and you die. And so, now hit the next slide, I taken my young sons over there, scared to death of maybe killing my kids. And so I'm looking at Everest and say, oh, okay, great, good, good, we're going to go hit this. We're going to go directly up Everest. We're going to just climb, whoop, right up Everest. What's the chances of doing that if we just set out and do that? We die. Just like our skier. What happens if you don't put some momentum and deliberate cuts and shifts in it? It can be real exhilarating for a period of time, but then eventually you crash and die. So at this point, go to the next slide. At this point, a number of my dear friends, and what prompted these deep-rooted feelings is a number of my peers and best friends were actually going bankrupt. It was the downturn of the real estate market, and I had friends that had been financially independent since they were basically your age, and they were losing their houses and going back. And I'm sitting here thinking, you're operating in direct lines. And so that month while I was in the Everest region, it's called the Kumbh region, I did a lot of deep thought thinking and contemplating about the concept of what does it take to succeed in business? How do you get stability? How do you make it so you don't blow your life up in the process? And so that month I'm hanging out with my little boys, and what are we doing? We're going and we're eating apple pie at Namche Bazaar, and then we're going over the Tingbe Monastery and we're dancing with the monks. And home when he put me, come on everyone, home when he put me home. We were having a blast, you know, and we were only gaining about 600 or 700 feet a day. And so we weren't actually even, most of the time, we weren't even pointed at all towards Everest. We were actually off in little crazy regions all over the place. And what was the result? A month later, we stood our 7-year-old at about 17,000 feet and took a picture of, you can't see it, but Everest there in the background. Then what did we do? I actually sent the younger ones back because it wasn't worth the risk and danger. And then go to the next one. And I put my two oldest at that point on top of Kalapatar looking right up at Everest. We succeeded by going indirectly for our goal. And I'd argue that in business, oftentimes we teach, okay, go to the next slide. In business, oftentimes we teach principles in business that it's a direct line. We write a business plan, we write a pro forma model, we proceed to charge to it, and it's no different than taking that direct course. And oftentimes, I mean, I've never seen a pro forma model in my entire career hold up longer than a year. So life and business are built in indirect lines. And that's what prompted the Zigzag Principle. For a number of years, McGraw-Hill had been approaching me about doing this book, and at that point I said yes, and so we did the book. Next slide, and proud that it became the #5 bestseller in 2011. And next slide. And so today I'm just going to quickly go through the components of zigzagging, and I only have 35 minutes. What time do we end, Tyler? 10-2? Okay, so I'm going to go rapid fire quick. I'm going to give you the sequential sequence of the Zigzag Principle, and hopefully a few examples of application of why it works. In all transparency, probably Oldstwider's business model canvas, it's actually probably more complex, and in some ways I even like it better. But the thing I love about Zigzag Principle, and I think that it's worked for a lot of people, because it's very practical, it's very actionable, and it's actually pretty simple, straightforward. So next slide, there's 10 steps that we put into the Zigzag Principle, and the first portion is what I call the firm foundations. The firm foundations are not the sexy part, okay? But it's actually the really important part that causes businesses to endure. And if you don't pay attention to that, you can zigzag, get to a success, but it's likely to flash in the pan pretty significantly. I think the major maturation point that I've had in the last 7 or 8 years of my career is I pay a lot more attention to these firm foundations on the front end. Even though they're not quite as flashy and fun and exciting, I make sure that these are set up properly. So number 1, assess your resources. Assess your resources and see what you have. And every single individual has something different. I call it what's in your pocket. I believe, 100% believe, that us 5 could grab what's in our pocket and we could create $1 million business out of what's in our pocket. But our resources and our talents and our abilities are all dramatically different. Go to the next slide. When I was you guys' age, that's the car I drove. It was a 1973 Dodge Colt that had been totaled 3 times. It had a cracked head, it leaked oil, and it was filled with oil, check the gas. And I couldn't drive it anywhere but around campus because it would overheat. And so my resource, my vehicle at that point was a lot different than what I can drive. This is what I'm driving now. I drive a Lexus IS 350 F Sport. Whew, I fly down the freeway, and my biggest concern is I'm going to get a ticket and take the cord, maybe take the zigzags a little too tight. But you know what it isn't? It's not a Learjet. It's not a Learjet. I can't fly. We don't have a helicopter. We can't go hover over. And so you have to understand what resources you have available at your disposal. And so trying to get out of alignment, or getting out of alignment what you're creating your business with is a really big problem. Okay, so go to the next one. So most individuals think, oh, all I have is money. It's all about money. Do you know that money is the least important part of the equation? Who believes that? Do you guys really truthfully believe that? Okay, this actually is a concept that came from one of my friends, a young man that I've done some mentoring with named Garrett Gunderson. He wrote a book called Killing Sacred Cows. And he had me on a national talk show one time. We're on live, and he says, you didn't create those companies. You didn't do that just with that money. And I said, yes, I did. And then he proceeded to teach me the value equation, and I thought it was so profound I talk about it every time. Number 1, mental capital. What do you know? What smarts, what unique talents and knowledge do you have? If you're dumb as a box of rocks, there's no chance you're going to have a successful long-term business. And so the first thing you have to do is educate yourself. I'm a huge believer in entrepreneurs finishing their college education. It's really foolish not to get that college education and build as much intellectual capital as you possibly can. Learning is incredible. President Wyatt and I were just talking about the books we were reading. That's sharpening your saw and getting great intellectual capital, and that will bring nothing but power for you. The next component of this is the plus sign. Most people think in business that you should use a minus sign. And I'm here to tell you what, every single break that I've got significantly, this little kid from Beaver with a Dodge Colt and $500 in my pocket came from contributing. Give. Use the plus sign primarily with your relationship capital. If you give, use all your brain trust, use the plus sign, do it to your key relationship capital, and do it in the form of an equal sign, you're going to have success. It's just a matter of time before that success happens. So most of the time what's in your pocket is not what's physically in your pocket, but it's your skills, it's the relationships that you have, and it's your ability to actually do good and contribute meaningfully for them. Every time you do that formula in equal sign, which is a business, it will yield money. How can worm poop yield money? Well, we know how to make it really good, which I guess in the hard part was a special formula. It's provided to individuals who really, really want their plants to grow good, to key relationships that we've developed through the years in the form of a business. It makes money. So even poop can make you money. Come on, that's better to laugh than that. Come on. Okay, so on to the next one. Assess resources, zig number 1. Number 2 is beacon in the fog. People think that zigzagging is undisciplined. It's actually harder. It's more disciplined. It's more complicated than getting a great big bag of money and just racing directly to someone. It actually takes strategic planning and thought, but it also requires a beacon in the fog. It's really critical that you have a big picture and big vision and big goal. Otherwise, you're just piddling around in the weeds. So zig number 2 is very simply create a beacon in the fog, a great big crazy vision. Zig number 3. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly here to get to the key points. Beacon in the fog, number 2. Number 3, emotional fuel. I call this catalyzing statements. A big vision does not necessarily equate to action. It requires emotional fuel, and I've seen this over and over and over through my career. A good example of this, hit to the next slide, was John F. Kennedy. For years, America had had the goal to have the top space program in the world. And how are we doing at that? Terrible. Terrible, terrible. We're doing terrible at it. The Soviet Union is way ahead of us. And then one day, he stood on a stage and he said, "We will put a man on the moon and return him to Earth safely before the end of this decade." That's a catalyzing statement. So feeding yourself a purpose and a vision catalyzing emotional statement that you can rally your team around, in addition to a big, crazy, hairy goal, is as vitally important. We are emotional-driven individuals and beings. We're not necessarily, I call it the croc brain. The very frontal cortex here is croc-oriented, and it requires emotional fuel to drive us. And so emotional-driven catalyzing statements are vital for a company to succeed. So step number 3 is emotional fuel-informed foundations. Number 4 is value-based decision-making. This is the single number one thing that I spend time on when I'm creating a company now. If you can get very articulate about the value-based decisions that you're making in the company, it simplifies all the fluff and problem. So most companies hire for talent. In other words, smarts, being really, really smart, and people they like. Does that sound right? Does that sound like a good hire? Come on, you guys are looking at me like I'm dopey or something here. This isn't that boring. Does that sound like about right? I would argue that that's absolutely the worst hiring combination you could make in life. Because not moral values, but the values that are in line with the company is critically important to that. As I reflected back on that hostile takeover, hey Raj, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. That strategic relationship that melded down on me, smartest guys in Utah Valley, love to hang around them, but guess what? I'm a bootstrap guy, and they like to raise capital. Me being the bootstrap guy, is that wrong? No, that's not wrong. Is them being VC guys wrong? No. But misalignment, what did I think was going to happen? I'm going to get squished like a bug. And so if you do that same thing, if you're really clear on what you stand for and what your company values are, then it will simplify a lot, the company a lot. In my office now, I look out and there's 2 companies that sit along the parking lot. One's an entertainment company, and they're about arts and dance, and people come out of there delightful and happy. The other company is a debt collection company. And so as I was writing this chapter, I was sitting there watching the contrast of how the 2 behaved. And think of how terribly bad it would go in their business if the debt collection company's value was, we're here to make our clients' lives happy and delightful and to bring joy and hope into their community and to provide them high entertainment. How's that going to work out for that company? Or let's say the happy company is we'll be honest but direct and deliberate in our communications and hold our clients accountable. They just don't work, do they? So every single company that I have now has a set of, and at any point in time I work with 5 companies, and so I keep them on my door. And every time I do a mentoring session with each one of them, as they raise a problem, this is what I go through. Let's see, I'll just grab one here. I'll do Frog Hairs, one of theirs. Cooperation, work, win, and waddle. We're a company that works and wins and waddles together. We don't hire Michael Jordans. This company will not hire a Michael Jordan. It hires only team players. So after the second interview, which is the prior to, the third is the value. And most of the time they didn't even know they're being hired or interviewed. The question will be asked, tell us about your last big win. Tell us about the last big victory you had. If the individual says, oh man, I'm Michael Jordan. I shoot, I dribble, I'm amazing. Oh, aren't I awesome? Guess what? They're done. I don't care how talented they are. But if they use we in the language a couple or 3 times, they say, yeah, I did have a really nice victory, and we as a team were able to do it, and I was fortunate enough to lead it, and then guess what? They pass that screen. And I'd say about 2/3 of the individuals don't cross the screen. Frog Hair works with probably 7 to 8 countries on a daily basis. So one of the trick questions is tell us about the last international vacation that you went on and what your favorite ethnic food is. If someone says, oh, I hate spicy food, it causes indigestion, right or wrong, they'll never work at this company. They won't. And it's not right or wrong. Some other companies may be made in America, steelworkers, if you go to another country, you're not going to work here. So it's not right or wrong, but getting really clear on what your value-based decision making is. And you'll see I've got this for each one of my companies. So I know that's not the really hot part of Zigzag, but I think it's vitally important. That's why I spend a little bit more time on it. If you want your company to endure and you want to do it without brain damage, spend time on your value-based decision making. All right, now on to the fun part. This is the zigzagging, the deliberate zig and zags. There are 3 sequential zigs and zags that we look at, and very deliberately in this order. Zig number 1, drive to profitability. Zig number 1 always looks like this. Okay, what's in my pocket? Oh, I got $5,000. I know a contact over here. I'm going to give myself this period of time and charge that with everything I am. And if I don't get to profitability in that prescribed time, then I cut it, kill it, done, go back to the drawing board, shake the dust off me, take a breath, look at the next one, evaluate, and then do it again. So zig number 1 is drive to profitability. And this is where so many businesses get into difficulty and challenge. And how in the heck can you do 40 whatever companies I've done now, and I'm old, but I'm not that old. How do you do that? How you do that is you fail very efficiently. And so zig number 1, forcing yourself to get to profitability, does 3 things. Number 1, if you're going to fail, you get it out of your system and you fail very efficiently. The second thing that you do is it forces you to be crisp and on your game and alert. And number 3, it forces you to focus on the key, critical, vital things. If you have a bag full of money, if someone walked up to some business plan that comes out tonight, and we're going to hand $1,000 out, we're not going to hand $100,000 out. Because if you got $100,000, what you're doing is you're buying scooters and longboards and desk furniture and going on junkets, and you're screwing up 3 years of your life. So drive to profitability is zig number 1 and really critical. Okay, zag number 2. In the first phase, I call you the butcher, the baker, and the patty cake maker. You're all 3. You're doing everything. You're just trying to figure everything out and get all the mechanics yourself. In the second phase, adding resources and processes, that's the point you actually start hiring. You start adding more, very delicately, you start adding individuals to the equation. You start buying and scaling the operation and adding, basically just adding increase in velocity to the machine. So this is the point where you formally start hiring, you start investing in the capital, you start getting a larger warehouse to do your work or whatever you're going to do. And most importantly, this is where you document very carefully what worked and what didn't work. As I was driving down this morning, didn't have breakfast, I almost got tempted to stop at McDonald's. Almost. I didn't do it. But McDonald's is terrible. Right? Most people think McDonald's is terrible, but it's equally and consistently terrible every single time. So constancy is really a critical thing, and the way that you do that is documenting your processes. I mean, think of the guy working at McDonald's. It's like a buzzer goes up, zzz, would you like a number 3 Happy Meal today? Could I upsize that? Zzz, goes off the buzzer, flip the burner. And they're able to document their processes very, very carefully. And that's a critical part of your business in order to able to maintain it and sustain it. Gerber wrote, Michael Gerber, does anyone know the book Good to Great or E-Myth? Has anyone read any of those books? Okay, great. We've got a few readers over here. But they talked about this dilemma in the form of what they call the technician in the business. In other words, a guy that creates a business and then he just can't get beyond it. And I'm going to talk in a minute how you get the momentum shifts. But typically, most businesses, I'd say 90% of all businesses that succeed, get stuck in profitability and become a slave to the business because they don't go through the effort to document their resources and processes and move to that next phase. So phase number 2, resources and processes. Next one, I'm going to have to go quickly, is a scale element. I'm going to spend just a few minutes here, but nothing really long. Scale element's actually where you build stuff into the business so the business is making money while you are not. Now, on that inclination angle, if you look at a zigzag zig, what most people do is they go, whoop, they instantly try going up to the scale element. What's a scale element? An app is a scale element. A technology that you can sell worldwide, that's a scale element. But the problem is as soon as you increase risk, you're a lot more likely to slip and die, and that's the reason for 1 in 10. If you pull that down and all you're doing is driving for, maybe even it's not directly to your goal, your probability of success is dramatically higher. So zig number 3 is scale element. So how do you get to that long beacon in the fog then becomes the question. It's actually that sequence over and over and over at a big scale. So you go through that same sequence over and over and over till you get to your beacon in the fog. Drive to profitability, add resources and process, add a scale element. And you do it incrementally, oftentimes shifting and giving yourself flexibility to move with where the market takes you. Because what happens if you go right from that scale element, most of the time it's not right. And by the time you get there, it's wrong. This slow down process actually gives you all these cool little insights of serendipitous little things that pop out that you wouldn't have otherwise known about. So that's the zigzag portion. The last portion is the guidance systems. And I actually think that this is in the zigzag principle. Okay, so who's buying this? Just get some, who thinks they can apply this concept? All right, well, I know that you can because you're already doing it. So there's a zigzag. Oh, you got it. Okay. All right. I just got to pass a couple of books out here because I don't want to carry them back to the back there. Okay, so the next portion I think is rather unique in the lean startup, and I think the primary differentiation factor of Zigzag Principle. And so the first concept of the guidance system is what I call creating your guardrails. And in my world, I have 2 sets of guardrails and would encourage you to do the same. The first is what are the definition points of success and failure on each one of those turns? I always have a money. That's an obvious, straightforward one. I always put a guardrail of this much money is how much I'll lose before I reset and go back to that, go back to start. The second is what's the duration? What period of time? I give myself, when I'm doing it personally, I give myself 3 months. Most individuals take 6 months to a year, so set a duration. Number 3 is a hard commitment of how much quantity of time. You in school, it's not realistic that you say, oh, I'm all in. I'm going to give 90 hours a week. So you have to give yourself a slotted allocation of time that you're going to dedicate. The young man that's, and we won't let him drop out of school or else we're done with him, but he's allocated very difficultly 22 hours a week is what he's allocated to that, to his guardrail there. Number 4th, and I think the most important and kind of instructive, is what relationship capital are you going to expose to this? Very seldom will I take all of my harebrained ideas, knowing that only 1 in 3 is going to succeed, and rush out to my most important individuals in my network. When I'm first exploring an idea and attempting to crack it, again, that asset's the most important one I have is the relationship networks and contacts that I have. So the first thing I do is I look for maybe a tier 2 or 3 or 4 supplier that I can test it on. Never my direct target. So I don't blow that relationship up. Or I look for individuals that you love me so much, like my brother Brett loves me so much. It doesn't matter how many times I dorked it up, he's still going to love me. So protecting your relationship capital and guardrailing who you will and won't take this to at what timing is an important part of your guardrails. So that's the first set of my guardrails. I also have a second set of guardrails that I think that everyone needs to have some non-negotiables in their life. And as entrepreneurs, we're taught to be incredibly just intensive and go after it at all costs. But that can be really super dangerous, you guys. So I actually have an intervention network set up in my life. My wife, my attorney, my accountant, and if I ever get violating any of the fundamental tenets in my life and commitments I've made, I won't sign a personal guarantee unless I control 50% of the business. Yeah, there's a bad story about that. I don't do anything with porn or inappropriate media. It doesn't matter how much money I'll make, won't do it. I personally have chosen not to participate in multi-level marketing ventures or firms. Right or wrong, it's one of my guardrails that I just don't do. One of my guardrails, with rare exception, is I like digital assets, not physical assets. And so I've got this second set of boundaries that if I start getting out of bounds, my intervention network pulls me back and says, you're about ready to crash here, stop. So those 4 or 5 guardrails that I gave you, money, time, duration of time, relationship capital, can be added to in every business typically do. But defining really, really clearly, how do you know when you have stopped? How do you know you need to stop and do your shift is a critical part. So guardrail your life, guardrail your business. It applies way beyond entrepreneurship. Next one. And this is the final one, and I think a really, really fun one. This is what I call creating the hidden treasures in your life. So go to the next one. Does everybody buy what I'm saying? It sounds really logical, doesn't it? I mean, really, why don't more people do it? I mean, it's straightforward logic. I mean, it's been written about hundreds of times. It really makes sense, doesn't it? No one can, I've never had anyone argue with it. But how do I go through this sequence? Maximus the horse. Ooh, profitability. Ooh, I'm going to be profitable no matter what. I'm going to, butcher, baker, batter me, I'm going to not quit him no matter what. Okay, that's Zig 1, right? Does everyone agree emotionally that's where I'm at on Zig 1? No matter what, I'm going to make it. Okay, now go to the next one. Ooh, go team, write your processes, make a few mistakes, I'm here for you, good luck with that, let's do our processes, woohoo. That's a pretty big emotional shift to make, isn't it? So that's Zig number 2. Now the hardest one of all to make that I think really takes the most discipline is the Sicilian. Inconceivable! You bested my giant, you beat my Spaniard. Inconceivable! You have to be thoughtful and methodical and deliberative and planning and strategic. So if you take those 3 persona types and blend them all together, you got the definition of schizophrenia. Although I'm not a medical doctor, I think that that's pretty close to what you got. You got insanity. So how do you manage that? How do you get not only yourself, but your team to actually change your modes at the critical times? It's very similar to when I ski. If I'm skiing, you can snow plow it, really awkward, or you can actually, how many skiers in the group? Oh boy, I'm really talking to a tough crowd today. You actually have to change momentum. You have to shift. You have to actually shift momentum. That shift of momentum is very uncomfortable the first periods of times that you do it. And getting yourself to do it, you think you're going to break your neck. And so in business, you have to force momentum shift. And how I have probably the biggest little trick that I've learned through the years of how to do that is quarterly, every 3 months, to put little nuggets of joy out there. I call it Pavlov's salivating dog nuggets, little pieces of meat that visually stimulate to change the behavior. So go to the next slide here. What that looks like is, here's one right here, September. If in September we get $60,000 of profit in that particular month, then everyone either gets an Arc'teryx jacket or a brand new Toomey bag. Okay? So what does that do? In front of every single employee in the team, it's, I'm Pavlov, I want that piece of me. It fixates you on the goals. Here's one plowing way to victory where this was Q1, and the whole team, we took snowmobiling for 3 new clients, another engineering, a couple of 3 little very objective goals that everyone focused on. that's putting that hidden treasure right in front of you and charging at you, that then takes you in alignment to sequentially do it. Then once you hit that goal, this is the conversation that takes place. Let's see, I'm just going to grab one. I don't know. This is a fun one. There we go. Brand new Louis Vuitton shoes and a makeup thing. I wouldn't have picked the makeup thing. But here's the conversation that takes place. Man, that was awesome. We just had these Arc'teryx jackets. We just went on this great big... We took everyone to New York to see Cats or whatever the cool thing was in this month. Wasn't that fun? Oh, wasn't that great? Okay, now, the behavior that we did this last 3 months, if we keep doing that, it'll kill the company. So, now, what we're doing is we're putting this goal over here, and these are the 3 goals that we're going to focus on. And if we do that, you're going to get a set of that luggage, those shoes, or a day spa makeup. I don't know any of them would have caused me to jump, but this team, I guess it did. And that's what causes the twist and the refocus, fixating that Pavlov-salivating dog on that action. Very simply, using that principle with yourself and with your team members is what's going to drive dramatic change. Okay, and the last one. Go to the next slide on this, you would. So, a lot of individuals say, do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, Rich? And so, oftentimes they do, but there's times I'll say, please don't be an entrepreneur. And I'll tell you why. When I was a young man, I grew up in Beaver, and I wanted that brass ring so bad I can't even tell you how bad I wanted it. I had my first break, and my mentor and boss at that point was a guy named Dr. Peter Horn. He was running all of Mitsubishi Electric's PC division, and he gave me the opportunity to be the general manager of operations here in the U.S. And so I was sleeping under my desk 3 or 4 times a week. I was probably doing 150,000 miles. I mean, I was way, way, way out of balance. And Dr. Horn says, Rich, we need a chat. So I jumped on a plane, went to Atlanta into Amsterdam, across the channel, and 22 and a half hours later, I found myself in Dr. Horn's office. And Dr. Horn sat me down and says, Rich, thrilled to see you. Really delighted with what you're doing in the U.S. market, but that's not why I called you here today. I called you here on a personal matter. Rich, you can replace anything in your life. You can replace cars. You can replace jobs. You can replace money. But the 3 things you cannot replace is, number 1, your health. Number 2, your trust relationships. And most importantly, your family. You cannot replace your family. Go home, and if you're in work in the next 2 weeks, you're fired. I had a very long 22 and a half hour airplane ride home as I recalled what had been going on in my life. I'd been to India. India was just first opening up, and I'd been into Bangalore down New Road, and we were getting this new development center and software developers, and I had brought back pertussis. Had been immunized, but had brought back pertussis, and tragically gave it to my whole family. And I'm sick as a dog, coughing my lungs out, just about ready to die. My youngest son was 3 months old at the time. It's Nathan here. And Nathan ended up in intensive care unit. And I was not there. I was sleeping under my desk. I kept going. I was trying to be Mr. Wonderful, trying to do it all. And I thought about some of the stupid things I was doing in my life and why Dr. Horn would call me over and have that conversation. I was so touched that when I got home, I raced instantly, and it was about 5:30 at night, and I went running to my little son Nathan's crib. I picked him up, pulled him out of bed, went to hug him, committed to do better, and he looked at me and screamed. He just started screaming, pushed me away. I recognized that my little son didn't even know who I was. That was the point that I quit the corporate world. It took me a couple of 3-4 years to actually get out and become an entrepreneur in earnest, but that was the point that I quit the corporate world. I will be eternally grateful for Dr. Horn giving me that advice, and that's the advice that I'd give all of you. If being an entrepreneur or working a job or doing anything is going to require you to melt down your most trusted relationship, destroy your health, or cause severe damage in your family, please don't do it. On the other hand, I can think of no greater way to control your destiny and your life than being an entrepreneur. It's crazy. It's exciting. It's so fun. I can't even tell you how exciting it actually is and the future that you have before you. The final concept I want to share, and I know we're out of time, right? I'm going to share one final concept before we do it. Most people think that life is a sequence, and it's not. This is not balance. I get up at 6, I do this, I read the paper, I go to school, I get home. I guess it's one way to do it, but I actually would argue that the more effective way to have life balance is go like crazy, study your guts out, work super hard, and then go to Europe and back around Europe for a weekend. This last week I've been in Japan, New York, twice. This last month and work my freaking guts out. But you know what? In a month, we're going to France, and I'm going to sleep in if President Wyatt lets me till 10 o'clock in the morning. Hard pushes to be both extremes is a more effective way. Crossing the line of balance is as equally an imbalance as actually walking a tight line of life. All right. That was really quick. That normally is an hour and a half, but thank you for having me, and I just wish you all well.